Today, we have the honor of hearing from an amazing scholar, activist, and advocate on our campus, Scarlet Bowen. I now would like to invite Adriana Barsan, one of our outstanding graduating seniors, on stage to introduce our commencement speaker.
It is an honor to have Scarlet Bowen, the director of the GLBT Resource Center, speak today. Scarlet is a unique individual who leads by example while embodying what it means to be an advocate and an ally for marginalized voices. Her presence extends far beyond the GLBT Resource Center's most active members, but also to the GLBTQ members who are more shy than their fabulous peers. Many students credit Scarlet as the reason for becoming more involved in the GLBTQ community on campus, and she has inspired many more to pursue the LGBT certificate program. Scarlet has this impressive ability to build a special connection of trust with her students. She emits a positive and nurturing energy that all can learn from merely by being in her presence. She dedicates her work to bring student organizations together in collaboration on projects and events. After working as an assistant professor of English and LGBT studies at CU from 2003 to 2011, Scarlet became director of the GLBT Resource Center in January 2012. She earned her MA in English from the University of Miami and her PhD in English with a concentration in gender and sexuality studies from the University of Texas at Austin. Committed both to queer studies, scholarship, and activism, Scarlet has published a book and articles on laboring class, gender, and sexuality, female masculinity, queering heterosexuality, and women's studies on the US-Mexico border. Currently, she is completing an essay about teaching laboring class women's poetry. Her inspiring activist work includes participation in Lesbian Avengers and ACT UP and the Coalition Against Violence Toward Women and Families on the border in El Paso, Texas. Today, she also works as an advocate for issues such as gender identity, healthcare benefits, improving services for transgender survivors, and making classes at CU more inclusive, or more LGBTQ inclusive. We can all look up to Scarlet as a role model, not only for her tremendous abilities as an educator, but also as an activist and ally. It is clear to anyone who meets Scarlet how much she cares deeply for the well-being of her students and visitors at the GLBT Resource Center. Speaking on behalf of my peers, Scarlet, words cannot describe how adequately express how incredibly grateful and appreciative we are for all your hard work you have invested to CU to make a more inclusive and safe place for LGBTQ students and their allies on campus. Please help me welcome our guest speaker, Scarlet Bowen.
That was the nicest introduction I've ever had. Thank you. Thanks for making me cry before I have to talk. I'm delighted to share this wonderful moment with you, graduating seniors of Women and Gender Studies. I also want to thank everyone here who supported you through your college career, friends and family members, and the faculty and staff who have been your colleagues as you've grown into feminist, queer, and critical race thinkers and leaders. As you heard, I've had a fairly recent change of direction in my career, taking on the director role of the GLBTQ Resource Center at CU. I've enjoyed it tremendously. It has enabled me to get back to my activist roots and to expand opportunities for advocacy and education throughout the university and in the community. I remember the first couple weeks of being on the job that Renee Roberts, who isn't here, but I know you all know who she is, and Carly Steffens asked to interview me for a class project on nonviolence. And they asked me about my life and how my life history had informed my social activism. You know, small stuff. I'm from New Orleans, and I developed a strong sense of class consciousness very early, being raised by a working class single mother. And I'm also very proud to say that I have survived and healed from a variety of kinds of violence in my life. And these experiences have fueled my commitment to addressing social inequalities and oppression. I left the conversation with those two thinking, wow, this job is really different from being a professor, to have those kinds of conversations. Suddenly I felt there was more room to breathe and be. And once that starts to happen, you begin to wonder, how did I ever go without oxygen for so long? And you start to crave that feeling of expansion and wholeness, just as naturally as seeking more and fresher air to breathe. So thank you for giving me more room to breathe. It's a feeling that I believe a strong feminist community provides, and it is essential. There's so much misunderstanding about feminism, and I still have people ask me about why we have to study and talk about so many isms: sexism, imperialism, heterosexism, cissexism, elitism, racism, ableism. And of course I explain, as you all know how to do now very expertly, that we can't change these structures of inequality unless we learn to name them and describe them and point them out. But something I think we talk less about is the important work that naming provides us internally. Because no matter how educated we are about how power works in society and between people, there are still times when we forget and we think that it's us who are broken. And that's when you need your feminist cohort to swoop in and pry the stealthy tentacles of those isms off your heart and mind. And when we do that for each other, it is no less than life and soul saving. I am eternally grateful for the support of the queer and feminist community that I have sustained over the years, many of them sitting on this stage. And I'm so happy that you've had the opportunity to cultivate that community as you embark on your next phase of life. I also want to take a moment to pay tribute to the intellectual diversity of your training as women and gender studies majors, especially as there's been a lot of interest about intellectual diversity at CU-Boulder recently. You've been reading the Daily Camera. The regents are really fascinated by it. As WGS students, here's my message to them. You have learned a plethora of approaches to thinking. You can assess the differences between liberal, radical, and conservative approaches to social change. You know the difference between assimilationist strategies and resistant ones. In your classrooms, essays, exams, internships, fieldwork, and demonstrations, you learn to work through your own positionality, your intentions to do good work and to offer solutions, but also to anticipate unintended impacts you may have on other people. And there are many other people to consider. It can be done, and it can be done right, as is evidenced by the recent passage of the Violence Against Women Act with its new provisions for Native American women's sovereignty, LGBT rights, and immigrant rights. But such a conscientious way of working is not fast, and it is not efficient. It is slow and a painstaking, critical process. It is supremely creative, and it is emotional, especially when you learn that your words or actions have inadvertently excluded or hurt someone. More and more, I hope that we can collectively push back against the pressures for speed, for productivity and output, so that more areas of our society, especially the work world, can learn to value this ethic of care that we as feminists bring to every dimension of our lives, whether it is teaching a class, writing an op-ed, or just being a friend. I know, for example, that you will be there to ensure that everyone at a meeting has gotten a chance to voice their thoughts. I know you will be there to educate parents about why a transgender child is entitled to use a particular restroom. I know you will be there to ensure an artist's work is not censored simply because it contains a picture of a vagina. Which, yes, that did just happen on our campus. Where is Pussy Riot when you need them? Oh, they're in a work camp. Damn. And I know that you will be there to help a survivor of assault regain their sense of dignity and control so they are not re-victimized. If we can rally behind the slow food movement, so popular in Boulder, then surely we can support a slow, multifaceted, critical movement to enable us to attend to people's well-being in a richer, fuller way. Having an ethics of care in all that we do does not mean that we don't make mistakes, but it does change how we think about mistakes. One of my favorite quotations is from Joseph Litvak on queer activism. He says, "A lot of queer energy goes into practices aimed at taking the terror out of error." I love that. Take the terror out of error and making the making of mistakes sexy, creative, even cognitively powerful. When I came out in the early 90s, we were in the middle of the AIDS epidemic, and the only way to get people's attention and break through their terror was to jar their expectations about what a demonstration was. So you had lesbian Avengers dressing in capes and teaching each other how to eat fire. I lean more towards kiss-ins, personally. ACT UP demonstrators showed up at baseball games and held up signs in the stadium that said, "No glove, no love." There are so many options for making change, and the beauty is that you get to choose what works for you and what works in that situation. Chela Sandoval has called this differential consciousness. Will your resistance take the form of Pussy Riot's guerrilla punk music performances in hallowed institutions such as the Orthodox Church? Will you become a CEO and encourage women to lean in, as Sheryl Sandberg has done? Or will you take the approach of Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who felt herself more a mediator than a crusader? She says her strengths were reasoning, crafting compromises, finding the good and the good faith on both sides of an argument, and using that to build a bridge. However you choose to intervene for social justice, it will be powerful, it will be meaningful, and it will sustain you and your community. Some of you were at Lavender graduation a couple of days ago, and I'll share with you a couple of things that people mentioned to me there. One comment was a parent who gazed at the crowd of graduates and said, in awe and excitement, "We are looking at the new face of civil rights." And the other was our keynote speaker, Nicole Garcia, who said, "Social change can wait a bit. Today is about you and all you've achieved, and it's time to celebrate." Congratulations to you all.